Hi guys, I can't believe we're live. We're so busy looking at Facebook. Hey, Kathy?
Definitely, hey?
Yeah.
Is technology not amazing? You know, you are so lucky. I'm an old ducky. I mean, this is, Indiana could have been my daughter plus 10 years, all right? And in my day, we had a phone that was like one of those with the little dial things that went, and it was plugged to a wall, and you couldn't move it. And your father listened to every single conversation you had. Hey?
It doesn't sound like too much of a bad thing. Look, guys, it's fantastic. Welcome, grade 11s. Finally, it's your turn. Grade 12s, I know that you're watching, brushing up on those much-needed life science skills. We're going to have a fantastic show today. Don't forget that we are on Facebook. It's facebook.com/learnextra. That's learnextra. I'm also sitting on Twitter. What will my mother say? My sister says, are you a tweeterer? I said, no, Mom, I'm tweeting. I mean, honestly, I'm a tweeter. Thanks, producer. So funny. Anyway, guys, well, what are we discussing? Types of skeletons today.
Yeah. Okay, people, just going back to what we did last week, we did transport systems in plants. You must know the structure versus function of the xylem and of the phloem, and the fact that the sclerenchyma tissue and the xylem is what gives a plant a skeleton. So plants actually do have skeletons, and you must also, I mean, you look at a plant, you don't sort of think, well, hang on, there is the tarsus and the metatarsals and the metatarsals and the tibia and the fibula, but their transport system, which is the xylem, mainly, carrying water from the roots up the plant, okay? Those xylem vessels are just tubes of reinforced, almost, think of it as concrete, poking off there and letting that water move up the plant. And then you've got the sclerenchyma that sits around there and gives this plant its shape. All right, your little green plants, the fact that they don't fall over, okay, is because they don't grow very high, so their support structure isn't as intricate as a plant that has secondary thickening. And when a plant has secondary thickening, please, guys and girls, you have lots of sclerenchyma in there. You've got xylem vessels to die for. They are major strong structures, and that is what allows that plant to have the rings in the trunk when you cut the trunk down, but it allows that plant to grow thicker and stronger all the way through. All right, make sure you know that diagram. I have a sense that your teachers would be asking you secondary thickening and also structure versus function of the xylem vessels. You've got to know that. All right, so now, going back to types of skeletons, we've already discussed the fact that a plant, that the structure of a plant is because, now you did this in grade 10, the cell walls of every single little plant cell, okay, those cell walls that are rigid and strong and made of cellulose, and I've just done that for the grade 10s. And then because of the xylem vessels and the sclerenchyma. Now remember, sclerenchyma is an amazingly strong strengthening tissue. It's sclerenchyma and the xylem that if you take a leaf and you dry it, and you flake away all the tissue part of it, you end up with the veins and that vein network. That's because of the xylem and the sclerenchyma. So that's the little internal skeleton. But here we're going to look at our animals.
You know what, Kathy, can you believe that we've already got a question that is pretty good to kick the show off? Are you brave enough to hear it?
Go.
Okay. It's from Banyini, and Banyini says, the hydrostatic skeleton, how does it protect animals that consist of hydroskeleton, and what are the disadvantages?
Okay. What I want all of you to do, it's a brilliant question, Indy. What I want you people all to do is you take a piece of paper, all right? You draw 3 columns on that piece, or 4 columns on the piece of paper. Draw a line across. Now, for your first column, you're going to have a skeleton type. So there, down the side, you're going to put hydrostatic skeleton, exoskeleton, endoskeleton. And then for your other columns, you're going to put in advantages and disadvantages. All right, and as we go through it, that is what you're going to write. So remember, the first column is going to be what it is. The second column, its advantages, and the third column, its disadvantages. I mean, the fourth column, the disadvantages. So here we go. Hydrostatic skeleton is any little animal. They're not very big animals or organisms that have hydrostatic skeletons, but they need to fit in and squeeze to very small places. So it helps them when they have a water or a fluid-based skeleton. And it's the sulum, which is a cavity which is all through the inner part of this organism that has this fluid in it. And the fluid is able to move. Now, the advantage is that the hydrostatic skeleton is very manipulative, and it allows the animal access into very tight, through very tight squeezing spots, okay? So it's very flexible. That's number one. And, I mean, if you take an earthworm, trust me, I don't want you to go and do this, but if I take an earthworm and I bend that earthworm right as tight as I can so that its head and its anus are together, it's never ever going to make a fold like a straw does. Now, please don't go try this, because that's actually cruel. The animal doesn't need that. But trust me on it. Why? Because it's filled with the liquid. All right, so there you have an example. Would be any planaria, any worm would have a hydrostatic skeleton. So the advantage is that it is able to move and be very flexible. Okay, and that's a good thing. All right. Also, this internal skeleton helps with circulation, because as this liquid is being forced forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards, it causes circulation to take place, because when organisms are lower organisms like this, they don't have very intricate blood flow. And believe it or not, they need oxygen to their little cephalization, like the basics of about 10 or 15 little brain cells sitting there in the front. Okay, they must get this fluid, oxygen, carbon dioxide away, nutrients to, wastes away, all of that in their circulatory system. So those are advantages. The disadvantage is anybody who has seen after a rainstorm a poor little earthworm that is left stranded on something, and when the sun dries the water out and the little earthworm didn't get back underneath there or drowned, because believe it or not, even though they live in the soil, if the soil is too wet, they drown. Okay? There's this dried up little, it almost deflates completely to like a skin. It would be like taking a balloon and letting all the air out. So the hydrostatic skeleton needs to be kept in place. So if there's a lack of water and dehydration occurs, the organism loses its skeleton, its ability to move, and it dies. So that's a really, really, really important disadvantage. But there's one more, is that this liquid or fluid internal skeleton, well, hello, it doesn't really protect anything, because if I take my fingers and I squish here, I'm going to hurt whatever organ is there. It doesn't, so there's no protection for the internal organs, and that is very important. Now, you go and you learn this little table I'm giving you now. Go stick it up on the fridge, and you may not open the fridge until you've read through the whole table, and I promise you within a week you'll know all of them. But it's common sense as well. Okay, moving along. We then go to our next little structure. Let's just see, but where's my picture? Okay, the next one would be your exoskeleton. Endo, people, always means inside. Exo means outside. Okay, so if it's exo, and it's not Gossip Girl, all right, exo, it's not that. It's exo meaning on the outside, and if it is inside, then it is endo. That's inside. All right, so exoskeleton, here is an example, would be an insect for here. Here you would have, and let's get ourselves a pen. Let's use nice bright yellow. You would have a head. You have this part here, which is the thorax, and then you have the soft mushy part here, which is the abdomen. Now you can pretty much think of any insect, also your arachnida, like your spiders, head, thorax, soft mushy abdomen. So it's the head and the thorax that makes that exoskeleton, and it's hard. It's made of a substance called chitin. All right, and chitin has a structure very similar to cellulose. It isn't cellulose, but it has a structure very similar to cellulose that you would find in the cellular cell walls of plant cells. All right, so you've got the chitin. It's protein-based, and what it does, I mean, it's a carbohydrate, and what it does is that it makes sure that this head and this thorax are hard. Now, the advantages would be that this thorax has points of attachment for the legs and for the wings. Now remember, the difference between an insect and a spider is that a spider has 4 pairs of legs, whereas an insect only ever has 3, whether it can fly or not. And then you've got your wings. So this thorax is a nice hard structure. Okay, so the advantage is the point of attachment for the legs and the wings, but what you've also got is that it protects those soft, mushy, little and delicate internal organs. It protects them. They can't be harmed because you literally got to crush that entire insect to get to those organs. All right, so it's a very special kind of skeleton, and it protects these animals, but they are also very mobile. Why? Because this chitin, which is what makes up the head and the thorax, has low density, so it's very light. And it means that the organism can actually fly without being weighed down by this armor suit that it has. All right, so that gives you the whole process of the exoskeleton. Oh, hang on, we haven't done the disadvantages. The disadvantages are that because the exoskeleton, the head and the thorax, are so rigid and hard, the animal, it actually restricts the size that the animal grows to. It can't get any bigger, all right, because that exoskeleton keeps everything quite tightly in place. So what you would have is, in the case of any insect, but I'm going to look at the locust, which is easy to find, locusts, grasshoppers in and around the schools. If you catch a locust or a grasshopper and you have a look at them, you can see that the head and the thorax very nicely. They are able to fly. So all of these processes that we've gone through here will apply, but they have to molt. And a locust will molt 5 times in its life cycle. So the problem is that every time that little creature, it will have its structure, and after metamorphosis, and metamorphosis is when you have an egg, which is laid by an adult clearly. So you have the egg, and then you have the larva stage, which is the caterpillar or worm stage that eats, and then you have the pupa, so it makes a pupa with this shell around it made of chitin to protect it, like silkworms, if you've ever kept silkworms. And then it breaks out, and your butterflies or your moths or your dragonflies emerge. Your adult emerges. The males and the females mate. They have internal fertilization, and they then the female lays her eggs, and the whole life cycle starts again. But the fact that the adult looks completely different through the stages from hatching to the adult at the end, that would be complete metamorphosis. If you have incomplete metamorphosis, that would be in the case of, for example, a locust. or a grasshopper, because what happens there is the little egg hatches and you have this little hopper, or what they call a hopper. It's just like a miniature version of the adult. And just like we have our children, they have the eggs hatch and they have their little babies that look like them, but they're miniature versions and they don't have wings. And as the 5 stages progress, this little thing grows till eventually the endoskeleton starts to tear. And at that point, it must molt. And this is the biggest disadvantage, is when it molts, that exoskeleton underneath is wet. And the animal, the creature, the insect, cannot move until, and it's vulnerable because it can get caught by anything that eats it. But at the end of the day, it can't move because its skeleton is wet. And it's got to wait for everything to dry before the little wings can flap away or it can run away. All right, because remember, the legs and the arms are attached to the thorax, which is part of the exoskeleton. So that's the biggest disadvantage, is that it restricts growth. And if the organism does grow during the growth phases in some species, you will have molting taking place. And the molting, that organism is completely vulnerable to anything that eats it, because it can't move until that exoskeleton is completely dry. So advantages, disadvantages. Then, okay, here we look at an endoskeleton. Now, endo means inside, just as exo meant outside. So, the endoskeleton, and John chose a very, very nice photo of a swordfish showing its bony skeleton. All right, now remember, your endoskeletons can, we have bony or cartilage. Bony, well, there are some fish classified as bony fish, or cartilaginous fish. Those are your 2 classifications of fish. All right, but if you look at your vertebrates, we have a choice between bony and cartilage. And your cartilaginous skeletons are endoskeletons, like, for example, in a shark. It's made of cartilage. Cartilage is the stuff that you have at the end of your nose. If you take your finger and you wiggle your nose, the part that moves is cartilage. It's what gives your nose its shape. This part here, your nasal cavity and bones, it is what makes the skeletons that have no meat on them look so awful. All right, so you've got the cartilage here. If you feel here and you push on your sternum, which is right in between your ribs here, if you put pressure there, it'll go wing, 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 wing like this. And what that does is it's made of cartilage. And if you take your ribs and you push, you can actually push your ribs. Why? Because they are joined with cartilage to the front, your true ribs, and your floating ribs have little cartilage bits to it. All right, it makes it flexible. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to breathe. Look, I want all of you to go, take a deep breath. What happens to your rib cage? Indiana?
I'm doing it, Kathy.
What happens to your rib cage?
It
lifts up. And it gets wider and larger because your lungs are like sponges. And what actually helps you to breathe is not your lungs sucking air in. The air only goes into your lungs because you are taking the pressure of the rib cage away. Right. And that then allows the air to pass in. But that's something you're going to do when you do respiration. Right. So we won't focus on it, but it's the cartilage here that helps the movement. In between the pubic bone, all right, now maybe we're going to do the whole human skeleton. In between the pubic bone, you also have cartilage. And that cartilage is what allows the female's hips to move apart for the birth canal, for when babies are born. I can see Indy sitting here shaking her head.
Terrified.
No, man, it's like, it's part of what we're supposed to do in life, hey?
This is why life science, Kathy, she's teaching me the ways of life.
Wait until we do the grade 12 reproductive process.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. Worst off are the STDs that people, the different STDs
I can't
that are
wait
out
until
there.
we get to the STDs section, Kathy.
I'm sure
Very
you'll be very
excited.
sarcastic now. But anyway, okay. Back to our endoskeleton, people. Here you're going to either have, you get two types of endoskeletons. It is either, why does it do this? Bony. In other words, it's made of bones. Or it is cartilaginous. Okay. Cartilaginous, it's made of cartilage. Right. Here, if we look at this, you see the eye cavity, the actual portion of the eye, and all the tiny little brain that's in here, and also the gills that are very important for respiration in your and gas, at least gaseous exchange in your fish. The spinal cord, because endoskeletons are located or found in vertebrates. Now, in grade 10, you have to remember that you did classification. And with classification, you grouped organisms on this planet into 5 groups. And if you recall, the most advanced group was the vertebrates. And the vertebrates was broken up into fish and amphibians and reptiles and birds and mammals. Us, mammals. All right, so bony and cartilaginous, and this is what we have the pleasure of looking at. Now, if we, I've got some more here. I'm going to just do this quickly. All right. Here are more endoskeletons. These are just pictures that John has sourced for me. They're beautiful. Here, these are all different types of snakes and reptiles. So there's a turtle, there's a tortoise, the bottom side of a tortoise, shame the poor thing. And this would be a snake, and this would be probably a python or a boa constrictor. I don't know, the people out there that are into snakes and reptiles, you'll be happy seeing this.
And then Kathy, I've got a question from Jory. Jory wants to know, how do you define cartilage?
Tell him we're getting there.
Jory, we're getting there.
Okay.
There you go.
Getting there.
All right. I don't want to ruin anything.
Yeah.
Kathy will get there.
It's just the different types of cells that make up bone versus what makes up cartilage. But remember, cartilage is made of okay, I'm going to tell you anyway, but I'd actually like to do it when we get to those sections.
Rather wait,
but
carry
the
on.
tissue, but it's made of chondrion, which are little structures that release a fluid that sort of is a gel state, and that's what creates the different types of cartilage that we have. Clearly, we have rigid cartilage and cartilage that is less rigid. For example, in your spinal cord, between the vertebra, you need a very specific type of cartilage. You know, when people say, I've slipped a disc, they're talking about the cartilage disc. All right, so there you're going to have less movability, all right, in that cartilage. That's going to be firmer. Whereas the one on the end of your nose, well, hell, people, you can go and
in your ear.
Yeah, in your ear.
And then all those piercings.
Thing. And also, if you think about how sore it is or how not sore it is, when, for example, Indiana, you go and you have your ears pierced. I mean, some people have like 20 earrings. I don't know where they get the money to buy all those earrings.
I have a few of those friends, Kathy.
Remember to change those earrings, because otherwise, I mean, there's no change.
Yeah.
But, okay, they can do this without wanting to die.
Yeah.
Why? Because there are less sense cells and nerve cells that sit in, and receptors that sit
as
in.
Opposed to breaking a bone.
Yes, where there's an amazing nerve complex. Okay, so here this is a starfish, just to give you another type. We really got carried away here. This would be your cartilaginous endoskeleton, which would be for a shark. All right, And I mean, especially with all the shark attacks and things that we've had, and before we go back to the human skeleton, let's just pick one of our skeletons. Let's do the reptiles. And if you have a look at whether it is a snake or a bird or a mammal, we have an endoskeleton. The skeleton is on the inside of the body. In the case of a shark, it's made of cartilage. In the sake of pretty much everything else that is a vertebrate, it is made of bone. Bone is made out of cells, which make up, or your bone cells, which will make up layers of tissue, which will make up the various bones that the snakes and us and the fish and the frogs and all the little organisms that make up vertebrates will have. Now, if you think of our endoskeleton, we can move. We can walk, we can go from A to B, the same with animals. That's why we need a skeleton which helps us to get from one place to another. We are not like trees that stay planted in the same place. Your hydrostatic skeleton organisms, it's so that they can move, and it is an adaptation to allow them to be able to be flexible, right? Then if you look at your exoskeleton, it has its advantages. It's hard, it's very protective, it allows for attachment of all the joints and the parts of the appendages. It protects those little internal organs very nicely so that they can't be harmed. So those are your advantages. The disadvantage was when it can't increase in size. Wouldn't that actually be nice, Indiana, if you think about it? If we had like, us girls, we had like an exoskeleton we could like slip into, and it would stop us from putting on any weight.
That sounds fantastic.
Hey, don't you think it's amazing? It would stop that increase in growth. All right.
And giving birth would be a lot easier, surely.
No, I think I'd prefer to lay eggs in that case.
Eggs. That's even better. That's even better. I like that.
Okay, so apart from talking a lot of nonsense, but at least it'll help you to remember this. People, so here with the endoskeleton, either cartilage, like a shark, or bony, like, for example, your birds and your bony fish and all your mammals, etc. It helps us to move. The point of attachment of all our striated muscles, and you must remember this because we're going to do it later, striated muscles make up what we call your skeletal muscles. All right, so the striated muscle cells will group together and form the skeletal muscle, and your muscles are all attached to bone. All right, now remember, your tendons attach the muscle to a bone. All right, very, very important. And when we look at all these different bones that are attached here, or joined here, or connected to each other, all right, in the case of a living organism, it would then be your ligaments. And it's the ligaments that hold bone to bone. It's the ligaments that prevent your fingers and all your limbs from just not dangling there. All right, it holds the bone to the bone, and the tendons attach the muscles to the bone. So points of attachment, perfect. If we look at, and I mean this is all common sense, easy to learn, easy marks, definite marks in an exam. If you look at your rib cage, what have we got here? What's inside here? Lungs? Are they important? I think so. Hey, Indy?
Yeah.
Without lungs, you have no air, you have no oxygen, or a means to get rid of the wasted carbon dioxide air. You die.
You would.
Exactly.
Instantly.
Not instantly.
With no air? Okay, what?
Well, you take 4 to 5 minutes, you'd get brain damage. Okay? And then, depending on the person, the size of the person, the lung capacity, how much residual air they have in their lungs, they could probably go for 7 or 8 minutes before they are now completely dead. But they would have very severe brain damage anytime from 5 minutes onwards. Okay, so we want to protect our lungs. We want to protect our heart. Because without the heart, you can't pump anything to anywhere. You want to protect your brain. Why? Because, hello, that is where your central nervous system is, and it's central, your spinal cord and your brain. So what do? We put the vertebra all around a spinal cord, because that's what makes us able to move. And the rib cage, we want to protect our heart, our lungs, our liver. They all sit in here, nicely coached away. And then we've got our kidneys, but our kidneys are backed up with a whole bunch of fat around them. When next time your mom goes to the supermarket to go and buy meat, go and have a look at the kidneys, the sheep's kidneys, that they'll have at one part of where the meat section is. And you'll see it's got layers and layers and layers and layers of adipose tissue, which is fat, to protect, but they sit here quite close to the spine, so they're still quite protected in a way. And then, hello, we've got these hips. And see, guys, that's one place where the girls definitely have an advantage. We have bigger hips than you do. All right, to protect our organs over here. All right, and what do you find down here? Our reproductive structures, so the ovaries, the uterus, etc. And when we have a baby, this is where we're going to carry the baby. Right, so, I mean, does this make sense, Indiana?
Yeah, it makes complete sense.
So,
actually, on that point, Kathy, we're going to have to go to a break in 2 minutes, but I want to say, on our page, where are all the grade 11s? Seriously, I feel like I'm talking to myself. It's me, Tembi, and Mapapuli, Lebza. I think she even said, they said, where are all the grade 11s today? And then Tembi said, right here, but it seems like there are only a few, hey? I said, I know. So guys, please get in those questions. You must have questions about what Kathy's talking about.
But maybe, Indy,
I know that unless
I'm
they
just
understand
explaining
everything.
it so absolutely awesomely, hey?
Well, then they must tell us.
That they don't need to send questions, because they are focusing on every word I'm saying.
Well, that's okay. As long as they are watching, then I'll let it slide. You don't have to write in, but as long as you are watching.
Just make Indy happy and just put a
Say
post
hello.
and just say, hi, hello, smiley face. And all those other little icons that you kids know about, that old people like me
P
don't
for
know
a little
about.
tongue out the mouth. Yeah, we know all about that.
All right, I think, should we take an ad break now, and then we can go on with the human skeleton?
Perfect. We're going to take an ad break, and after the ad break, when we get back, we do have a question from Tato. Tato, you know what your question is, because you're the only one that's been posting questions on our wall. We'll see you right now after the break. Hi guys, and welcome back. We're having such a great time. Finally, everyone's starting to ask questions. And Dile, we're going to get your question a little bit later. Hey Kathy, just give us a little bit of time. But I think right now we're going to go over Tatu's question. Tato, and I think there's one other person that asked the same question. I'm sorry, I've lost your name, but let's get to the question. With hermit crabs, would we still refer to them as exoskeletal because they don't have a permanent skeleton?
Okay. Remember, a hermit crab finds an empty shell and then goes and hides inside it. Okay? It would be the equivalent of a tortoise shell, where the tortoise has now died, and a whole bunch of ants go and make their ant nest inside the shell. So, no. It's the shell has nothing to do with the hermit crab. But if you look at the hermit crab, all right, it has a hard outer skeleton, the same as, for example, crayfish. Okay, if you've ever seen crayfish, and when they cook crayfish, they're supposed to take them and chuck them live into the water, and then they make that squealing sound, which they actually don't, because it's those hard outer exoskeletons that now pull together. So that should be the exoskeleton. So your hermit crab would have an exoskeleton, but instead of hiding under a rock, it makes its home in a shell. All right, hope that answers that one. Then somebody sent a question just now. You told me about, Indy, about spicules.
Yes, I think that was Andile.
Okay, Andile, you've caught me completely off guard here.
We've been Googling it.
We've been Googling it, but from what I can gather, I don't know, or I'm old, man. You see this? I'm old. I don't remember. So I think a spicule is a protein substance mixed or together with a calcification, which takes place in a skeleton. All right. And it will probably, spicule somehow makes me think of little pointed structures, but maybe I'm wrong. So if
that's
anyone
what it says. It says here, I've Googled it, thank goodness, it says a minute, sharp pointed object or structure that is typically present in large numbers, such as a fine particle of ice. Does that make any more sense?
Okay, so we can then deduce that spicules would be calcified bone or protein and bone structures. That would form, or calcium rather, not bone, calcium and protein structures to make it nice and hard, all right? Because remember, your hair is chitin, your nails, which can be very hard, is chitin too. But if you think of a rhino horn, it's actually made mainly of hair. But I would then say that my logic would tell me, because I really can't remember, is that it would be those little outgrowths that you have, for example, let's see if we can find our little starfish here, there. On the little starfish, but go and look it up and let us know if we're right. Okay, but it would be like little pricky things that sort of stick out of a exoskeleton shell.
Yeah, well, what it says here as well is each of the small needle-like or sharp pointed structures of calcite or silica that make up the skeleton of a sponge. But guys, if you know what a spicule is and you have a better definition than we've got, please put it onto the page and we'll read it out loud. Why not?
Cool. But you know what? You can. It's not something that I have ever had to teach ever. But it's one of those things that teachers put in to make learners interested, and it pricks your interest, which is cool. I know when I go home, the first thing I'm going to do is get onto the internet. I'm going to go Wikipedia and Google, and I'm going to go and check what a spicule is, which is cool. That's what learning is all about. Oh,
and who knows, Kathy might even post it onto the wall later.
Yes. But people, remember your advantages of the endoskeleton is that it protects all your internal organs. It doesn't hamper circulation at all, and it makes us completely and totally adaptable to any kind of surface. So for example, the vertebrates, you've got your fish and your cartilaginous fish all swimming in the sea, you've got your birds flying in the air, you've got your reptiles crawling around wherever they go. Do you follow what I mean? It makes us very, very versatile because of our ability to move. The disadvantage is when we lack phosphorus and we lack calcium, the bones become very porous. Like, for example, if people get osteoporosis and the bones break very easily. All right, so those are your advantages and your disadvantages. Learn them. I would learn, if possible, 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages for each of those structures. You'll never get asked for more because you'll have to do a table, which will already give you a mark. For the table structure, for putting the correct headings in will be another 2 marks, and then you would get a mark for each of your comparisons. Do it, know it, it's easy, and if you close your eyes and think logically, it will be something you don't have to learn. Okay, now let's move on to our human skeleton. Okay, wait, here we've got the long bone. Let me just see what bones I've got here. And, okay, let's start with this. Seeing we're looking at skeletons, this is the tissue of the skeleton. Now, with the grade 10s, we went through cells make up tissues, tissues, layers of them make up organs, organs, various organs make up a system, and all the systems together make us the organism. And we went with the grade 10s one step further where we said organelles make up the cell. So remember the cell from last year is divided into, or is the protoplasm. Inside the cell membrane you have the protoplasm, and the protoplasm is the nucleus. and the cytoplasm with all the other organelles floating around in it. Okay, so if we look at our bone tissue, this would be a slice through any bone. What you would have, and you need to know these labels, people, please make sure that you know them. All right? Here you would have this central canal. This hole here, this canal here, is called the Hydrostatic canal. Now, it's a horrible word. I mean, it's really difficult to spell. So what you do, and you do like you did when you were little, and you used to have those, come on, Indy, it's not so long for you. You can remember when you had to learn vocab words.
Ages ago.
All right, yeah. In grade 1 and 2, and you'd have your spelling test every day so that you knew how to spell words.
Yeah.
All right, because we didn't have automatic spelling, and you shouldn't be using automatic spelling. All right, so take that word Hydrostatic, all right, and it's pronounced Hydrostatic, even though there's a C, because remember sometimes the letter C.
Hydrostatic.
Hydrostatic sounds horrible. Hydrostatic sounds far better. Write the word out 5 or 6 times. Close your eyes, write the word. And then look at it. And then close your eyes again. I mean, you're old enough to be able to control your hand. Write it again. And almost picture it in your head. And I promise you that's the best way to learn difficult spelling. But it also gives you a term. Because the Hydrostatic canal is the little canal that allows for the blood, the artery, and the vein. All right, so you're going to have a little capillary network at the end of it, okay, and it's got a nerve. And that is why when we hurt our bones, it is sore. Have you ever broken an arm or a leg?
I really haven't, and I don't have any wood to touch on now. Kathy, look what you've done to me. I probably will go home and break a leg now. But what I wanted to know as well, I mean, it's related, from a caller, they want to know the process in which new bones form. So I suppose it could relate to also
They grow exactly the same as your skin does, or any part of your body. Remember, the cell will undergo mitosis, and in that process, it will produce an identical cell. And that's how we grow, repair, and replace every single structure in our bodies. Okay, now, you have your Hydrostatic canal, very important, blood supply, and your nerves. Then you have the caniculi. Now, if you look at the word caniculi, it actually is canal. Okay, and that's exactly what it is. It's a little canal, and that little canal allows for communication and transfer between the different little cells. And what are the bone cells? Well, inside here, you'll see these little things that look like a spider. And I've circled it. Maybe we can zone in a little bit. I'm going to try, let's make it, I'm going to use lime green marker here. If you can see that. It looks like a little spider with lots of legs, so it clearly couldn't be a spider, but spiders only have 4 pairs. But this structure there, right in the middle, this little thing there that I've now highlighted in the middle, is your osteocyte, people. An osteocyte. Now, you must have, please tell me, you have heard of osteoporosis. And the problem is that us ladies, females, the fairer race, we end up with osteoporosis far more than men do. Why? Because, and this you'd need to be able to think about when you're in matric, is we carry babies. The babies are here. So the gestation period of the babies of mammals is inside the female. And the baby has bones, it has an internal skeleton just like we do, so it needs calcium to make those bones, and what happens is it pulls calcium from our bodies. So if you're a female and you have an XX chromosome, okay, that means that your body will release calcium very quickly and very easily because it's designed to, so that if you should be pregnant and there is a baby growing inside you, it must be able to access all the calcium that you have. All right, so that's a very important aspect there, and that's also why males with XY chromosomes, your males of the mammal species, has heavier bones, always, because you store calcium. Your bodies don't need to give it to anything because you don't carry the offspring inside you. So there's a little something interesting. So osteoporosis is what us poor girls get. Why? Because the little cells here, there's one there, and there's another one here, and there's another one there. Those little osteocytes, which are the bone cells, I'm going to write here bone cells. Please never ever refer to them as bone cells in an exam. Your teachers will shoot me. But it's to help you, I'm going to put this in brackets, it's to help you remember osteocytes, little bone cells, and what they do is that they need calcium, and in that process they are able to make, through mitosis, new little cells. They need to be able to communicate with each other, and they do that through the little baby canals called canaliculi. They're baby canals. It almost sounds Italian. And then you've got your Haversian canal, which flows all the way through the bone, or is all the way through the bone, and that is where you're going to find your blood vessels and the nerve. All right, so the lacunae, all right, is the structure. This little lacunae is the, I'm going to put this in brackets too, the cavity. You can't call it a cavity because it has a name, but it's the cavity in the bone where the little osteocyte sits, where the little bone cell sits. Okay, so this, your little bone cell, the bone cells communicate with each other through caniculi, and they get their oxygen and their nutrients, okay? I'm just put nuts, the nutrients goes into the, or to the cells, and you're going to have your CO2 and the wastes will get away from, be carried away from the little cells here in your Haversian canal. And any pain that you feel in your bones will be here. All right, now let's go through. If we look at all the bones in the body, no. Okay.
Can you believe that we actually have 5 minutes left to the show,
it's time flies when you are trying to get through tons of work. That's all I can say.
No, it's amazing, hey?
All right, people, let's do the long bone. Now remember, if you think about it, just close your eyes and try and picture a skeleton. All right? Just picture a skeleton. You've seen them in the movies. You've seen them in your textbooks, etc. The skeleton. All right? You've seen them in horror movies where you've got the guys that put those suits on for Halloween with the skeleton painted on it. All right? You've got different shaped bones. You've got bones that are very regularly shaped. You've got bones that are very irregular. Now think of a regular bone, a regular structure. Okay, would be, for example, this bone here, or this bone here. If you, or at least this bone here and this one here. If you eat chicken and you take the drumstick, that bone that you chew the meat off, that is the chicken's femur. All right, and the way I tell, remember I taught boys for so many years, I don't even care to remember. I say, I can remember if a girl's got good legs, girls have beautiful legs, generally. It's because of our femurs that are so long and slender. And the femur belongs to a female. So this is the femur. All right, it's a long bone. Then we get little short bones. Now, I mean, where do you think we'll have short bones? Come, Indy. Where would we find short bones?
In our little short hands.
In our little short fingers and our little short toes and our hands and our feet and our palms and our wrists, or our palms. That would be the short bones. So long bones, short bones. And then we have flat bones. Now, where do you think a flat, and remember, Indy doesn't do biology or life sciences. Okay, so tell me, where would we find a flat bone?
She loves putting me on the spot. Okay, so either over here, on your back, your wings, what do you call those?
Wings?
My angel wings. My pelvis.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Clearly she didn't do life sciences at school, people. What do we call this thing at the back here? It's not your angel wing. It is your scapula. Okay, so...
My scapula.
Your scapula, darling, your scapula.
Darling.
Okay, so, and also, look here, what have we got here? These nice big pelvic bones, are they not flat?
See, yes. I said pelvis.
You didn't, you said chest up here somewhere.
I did say pelvis. I want the reruns of this tape. Carry on, Kathy.
It's okay, I forgive you.
Guys, did I say pelvis? Did I say pelvis? Okay, let me know. On the page. Cool.
Okay, so you've got your pelvic bones, nice big flat bones. Why? To protect. All right. And your irregular bones, well, hello, those you're going to find along your spine. I mean, just think of those bones. They're all hard, they're not pliable. The next time you have a chicken, take that carcass and have a good look at all the different types of bones that you can see. All right, so we're going to look at the long bone. Next week, I want you to make sure that you know this long bone, because if I was your teacher, I would give this to you for 10 marks. All right, I would ask you to label 2 or 3 structures, and I'd ask you what their functions were. So you must learn this diagram. Okay, so you've gone from the cells, the osteocytes, to the bone tissue, which is what we looked at, where they have the Sean canal and the caniculi, the little canals that attach, the caniculi. And we then have to look here at the long bone. And the reason the long bone is so important, because this contains the bone marrow. And that bone marrow is where our red blood cells are made. Right, so there you go. Over to you.
Sure, what a lesson. I can't believe it. Guys, today has been absolutely incredible. Thanks so much, grade 11s, for chatting to us on our wall and tuning in to Kathy. And I know that you guys, I promise, if you stick with Kathy, she will teach you everything you need to know about life science. And this is coming from experience from me. I sat with her last year in finals, and she did wonders. Guys, grade 11s, thank you so, so much. Grade 12s, don't forget that you're on next. Finally, I know that you guys have been amped right from the beginning. Grade 11s, that's us, and see you next week, and goodbye.